Hello, and welcome to On the Real Side. I'm Bob Mover, and today's distinguished guest is my good friend and one of my favorite trumpet players, Mr. James Zollar. Hi, James.
Hey Bob, how are you?
I'm feeling well, and I'm happy to have you here. Um, we'll get into the fact that James and I have known each other for some time, but there are a lot of things you don't get to ask somebody just in everyday life. And to explain to you people, whoever's are people out there watching, um, James is a very wonderful musician, and he always reminds me of what Ella Fitzgerald said about Benny Carter, that he's everything a musician should be. And yet a lot of cats, there aren't that many, I shouldn't say a lot of cats because there aren't a lot of cats like that, but there are some out there, and New York is especially well known for that. um, the type of musician that's absolutely of the very first rank and constantly is working. Everybody wants him in their band, and yet they don't get the critical recognition and the large recording contracts or those type of things are not prevalent. Yet there's somebody. They really are the wheels in the machine that keeps jazz going. And so James to me is one of the better examples of that type of thing. Not those of us who know James, but a lot of people uh, don't don't get that. Uh, he doesn't get that kind of exposure for some reason. And for instance, Ravi Coltrane said about James, James is a really nice guy and a very personal sounding cat with a unique approach. He's absorbed the history of the music and he plays it with great care and warmth. And he doesn't try to sound like someone else. And so, you and Ravi have been jamming together for years, right? James,
Yes. hmm
kind of came up together. Among other places you might have seen James is in the movie Kansas City, the Robert Altman film, where who did you depict in that movie?
if I remember right, it was Buck Clayton.
Where he played Buck Clayton, who was, Lester Young's partner in the Count Basie band and
Right.
in the Kansas City 5 and 7, those groups. And Kansas City was a movie that Robert Altman he made, and where he tried to depict the feeling of Kansas City
Right.
in the 1930s, really, maybe 30s, 40s, using young modern musicians.
Right.
Uh, and it was a mixed degree of success, but it was a very ambitious project. And it was just wonderful that he even attempted to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Kansas City,
Well,
Missouri.
that's another thing I was going to mention, that James was born in Kansas City, and when then you moved to San Diego. Is that where you went right after Kansas City?
No, I went to a town called San Mateo, California. It's a suburb right near San Francisco, and that
Near
happened
San
in
Francisco.
1970,
Uh-huh. And how old were you then? You were
about 9 or 10.
9 or 10. Now, this is like things that you don't find out when you play with people.
hmm
You don't ask them questions like this, but when you sent me your bio, a very interesting, kind of funny thing here is that James Delano Zollar began his musical career at age 9 playing bugle in his
Yes.
hometown of Kansas City. Was your father in the military or?
Oh, no, not yeah, he was in the military, but the bugle didn't have anything to do with me picking up him. The bugle didn't have anything to do with me picking up the. I did pick up the bugle, but not because of my father. Put it
Well,
that.
what is the story of you and the bugle? Let's
Okay,
start
there you
there.
go. Okay, my sister's husband. Just it was just how things in life happen by chance. My
I've
sister's
heard
husband.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just happened to bring home a bugle one day, and I just started toying around with it. I saw the mouthpiece, and and I automatically just took to it. I saw, in fact, I got a bugle here I can show you later. But yeah, so anyway, I just started toying around with it, and I could see how to manipulate the mouthpiece because the mouthpiece was connected to the bugle, and there was no valves, so a lot easier. I could deal with it a lot easier because I didn't have to worry about no valve combinations. And the first
Right.
thing, yeah, is easy. And the first thing once I learned the air, the how to just put the air through the horn. The first thing I learned how to play was reveille and taps because you can play that stuff without.
Yeah. Well, that's we have similar backgrounds that way because my dad was a trumpet player, and I remember being like, maybe 5, 6 years old, and taking his horn out of the case or letting when he was practicing, I'd take it, and I could play taps and reveille because you didn't have to worry about the valves, and I could play the trumpet, and I was playing that stuff on the trumpet also, and I realized later it taught me about how to manipulate air. You know,
Right.
you're getting lessons you don't realize that are going to be very helpful later because you breathe very naturally on the instrument. You know,
Right.
when
Exactly.
you have that kind of early kind of training.
Yeah, and it's a song. It's a song, so that gives you can play a song when you're like 9 years old. I was like, I was into it.
Oh yeah, it's like playing chopsticks on piano.
Right
You,
there,
you
you
feel you like you're Horowitz. You
go.
sit there, you're very serious. You know,
Right.
that's a wonderful feeling. That feeling of musical accomplishment, some kind of gain and progress. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
It never
exactly.
leaves you.
That inspired me to keep messing around with it.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. There was something I succeeded to do. I could play a song. It's a wonderful thing. I've seen my kids go through that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
the other thing is that, like, well, what was the first music you remember kind of listening to? What was your family musical? Were you an
yes.
only child, or do you have
Oh,
other
I got a big family. Big
big
three
family?
boys, three girls. I was the last of three boys. So,
Okay.
and my parents were into music. My mother played a little piano, and they had a serious uh, 78 jazz collection.
Uh
So
huh.
yeah, but that was their thing. See, when I was coming up, I was listening to, they had 78s in those booklets. Do you remember those booklets at
I
78 records?
do. I do. How they would open up, and there was a hardcover on the outside,
Right. And they're
and on
really,
the inside, little
really,
folder here.
really thick records. Really thick records.
Right. Yes.
They had all the Bird stuff, Lester Young 78s, but I didn't check. That was too advanced for me. I mean, I didn't listen to that. I mean, at that time, I was we had like the 45s of Aretha Franklin and the Jackson 5. So that was, like I said, and that was 1968, 1969. So that was some of the first music I listened to. I remember Aretha Franklin and Jackson 5, and I remember they had a collection of Ahmad Jamal stuff. Um, Ahmad Jamal, wow, I got some of her for records here, but yeah. So I started off listening to R&B, I guess, and then I realized that they had a serious collection. I remember my mother really liking Ahmad Jamal.
Well, that was very popular. That Ahmad Jamal at the Pershing Room was a very popular. I mean, it was one of the first LPs that I think that and like Errol Garner's Concert by the Sea.
Yeah, those are the ones.
There were certain jazz records that transcended the jazz audience.
Yes.
Before Bossa Nova, the next thing was sort of the Gets Gilberto thing and the Stan Getz and the Charlie Bird. That
Yeah.
kind of transcended the it got beyond the jazz public and into the public. And Ahmad Jamal and or as a guy in France one night I was having a discussion about music with this guy and I speak a pidgin enough French and we're sitting there but he kept talking about the grand the grand pianiste uh, Amajama and
Right.
I kept trying to think who the heck is Amajama and then I finally realized Ahmad Jamal I see Amajama Amajama
And then
but
oh, I was going to say also, some of my first listening stuff was my father had a tavern, and he had a jukebox.
oh
Yeah, so this was very interesting. My father had a jukebox, and I remember Lee Morgan's Sidewinder on that
Oh,
jukebox,
yes. That's another one that sort of transcended the jazz public.
and Misty, Richard Groove Holmes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that
His
was some of
version
the
of
first
Misty.
jazz.
So your
That was
dad had a tavern.
yeah,
That's
hmm
very, very interesting. So it was like booze and food and tavern characters. Did you hang
exactly.
out in the tavern? And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
must have, right? You were
Oh yeah, I was pretty eight. I was seven, eight, nine at the time, and I just remember that jukebox, and I definitely remember the taverns, the characters, and the name of the tavern was called Al and Buds, because my dad's name was Alfred Zollar, and
uh,
his business partner was Buddy, Uncle Buddy. So
oh,
so, so they called it Al and Bud's Tavern.
oh, that's beautiful, man. And was that in San Mateo or
I was in Kansas City.
Kansas City? Oh, so that was jukeboxes were so wonderful, man. You would really there were certain records that were like on these jukeboxes, like Gene Ammons' Canadian Sunset.
Yes, that
Was a
was
big
one
one.
of the ones. That was
That
on
was
there.
on there, right? I think you could know. Yeah, Richard Groove
Yeah,
Holmes missed me,
I remember at a really young age hearing that. That's right. That's one of
right? There were certain jukebox hits.
yeah.
They were like, which had a great jukebox. I haven't been there in a long time because of my condition. I don't really go out these days. But my daughter Emily was in town. She lives here,
Yeah.
and when she's not on the road, but she took her boyfriend to the corner bistro the other night.
Oh,
The
I
hamburger,
love that. I love that place. Yeah, we used to eat late night cheeseburgers there, right
right?
down.
They still got as good a cheeseburgers you got to find in New York or the world,
Yes.
and their chili is killing too. By the way, it's not as well known as the burgers, but I would go for the chili as well. But anyway, I haven't been there for a long time, and that was very close to Smalls. So in the early days of Smalls, a lot of the cats would go between sets over to the corner bistro, and they would drink over there because Smalls didn't really have alcohol in it at that time. And so they'd grab a drink or a burger at the corner tavern, and Grant Stewart and Chris By, all those guys would, Sasha Perry, they'd be over there at the corner bistro. And, but it had the best jukebox. It had an incredible, you had Al Cohn and Zoot Sims on the jukebox and this and that. So I said to my daughter, when you're over there, she came back from the corner bistro and she took a chili for me to go for me. And I said, so the jukebox, was it there? She said, gone.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
gone now. But
I remember that place so well.
yeah, and part of the attraction, at least to us, was that great jukebox too, because it still had Canadian Sunset on it.
Yeah. But those man, those tunes are priceless, man.
Yeah, and they always had some Dinah Washington on them. And it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah, Dinah Washington was one of the things I was inspired to listen to. Sarah Vaughan, all the vocalists, because my parents were really deep into the music.
yeah, that would, so, it's interesting. We find out where that gift comes from because you're a very lyrical player. One thing I've always liked about your playing is the singing quality of your trumpet. It's, not everybody has that lyricism that you have.
Well, I can't sing like you, that's for sure.
I can't sing like me either anymore.
Yeah, I love your singing, by the way. You talk about lyric
Oh,
quality.
thank you. Well, you're the guy. You're the one, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, that last record you did, one of the ones you did with Josh Evans, I think you sing on a side.
I sing on some of it, yeah. And
Man,
well,
that is
thank you. I mean, there was after my tracheostomy, for those of you who don't know, fortunately, I speak a little scratchy, but not always. Today is a little bit like on that side, but I can still play my horn, thank God. But I can't sing anymore. I don't even have an octave range, and so that's gone. But I think a couple of jazz critics are happy about it. But anyway, the but I mean, you have a beautiful quality, and I can see that I can tell when musicians listen to singers, it comes out in their playing, especially if they heard it, because when you get it young, you're not really listening to improve as a musician or to do. There's no purpose but to enjoy it,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know. And I think that the sheer joy of listening to somebody sing and trying to sing yourself, whether you sing well or badly, is just something that happens as a kid. And when you get that love for it, that will greatly affect the way you play later in life.
Yeah, the vocal quality of those records made me feel good, and that's what made me want to get into music. This is before the trumpet, before before the bugle. I just love the way the music made me feel. I mean,
Yeah, the feeling of it, and yeah, and I can see that. And did you ever, once you thought about music, did you, well, when you were coming up, did you think of other things that you might want to do? I mean, maybe it didn't occur to you professionally. What was your evolution that way?
okay, the first two things I wanted to do was I wanted to be a typist and a preacher.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know, I know.
I could see you as well as either of those things, but a preacher is a little more fascinating to me. What attracted you? Did your family, were they church goers regularly? And
Exactly. That yeah, we were definitely churchgoers. My family, we used to go to church every Sunday, and so I remember those two things. And then after that, I really wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be uh, either a professional football player or basketball player.
oh, me too, but I stunk.
Yeah. I did certain things. I wasn't very good at baseball, but I think I felt I excelled in track and basketball and football.
Well, you're still an avid tennis player.
Yeah, that came later. Yeah, I'm really into tennis. I play tennis. That's all I do now. As far as like athletic stuff, I jog a little bit, but yeah, I got into tennis when I was say about 15, around 15 years old.
And you've been steadily doing that since then.
Yeah, since then, yeah, I've been playing tennis um, pretty much, pretty often since like within the last 15 years.
Uh-huh. And when you were 15, you were already playing the trumpet.
Right.
So you hadn't thought about like being a tennis pro?
No, 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 no,
No.
no, 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 not at all. I was thinking about football at that time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And were you on high school football team and all that stuff? Did you do
Uh,
that too?
Let me see. By that time, I kind of started getting into trumpet, so I was in the high school basketball team. And
Uh,
I wasn't bad, you know. I was okay.
I was born with what they called gross motor difficulty, which made my coordination really lag behind the average kids.
Hmm.
Coordination, how I play a saxophone, I don't know, but I couldn't play. I love playing piano, but I couldn't get both hands to move in different directions.
Oh,
And I had a teacher who gave me Bach inventions, and he told me all stories about Bach and like even his life and having all those wives and children and this idea of the happy family and his strong religion
yeah,
and everything. So I got really into that, and I really liked those inventions. I loved the way they worked, but I could not get the two hands together. So I ended up learning one hand at a time, but I still can't put them together.
interesting.
So
Yeah,
so I was, and then I wanted to play baseball. I really worked at it, and my dad would pitch baseballs to me in the backyard. I mean, after school, after work, every day we'd go and try to get me good
yeah,
because I was very slow runner and I swung. I couldn't, I wasn't very good. I'd watch baseball. I understood how it should go, but it didn't happen when I would bat. And finally, I did join the little league, and I got to play first base, and I actually got to be an adequate baseball player, not very good, but it wasn't laughable. And my dad got me a book about Lou Gehrig, and he explained how Lou Gehrig was not a natural like Babe Ruth,
Mhm.
and he had to work much harder because he didn't have the natural talent,
Yeah.
and that I could work harder at sports, but probably honestly never be as good as Lou Gehrig because I had less natural talent than Lou Gehrig. He had some talent for that. But my dad did encourage me. He said, music, you've got natural talent for that. So, maybe you should think about in life. Later, he hated the fact that I wanted to be in music, but
Yeah.
he said, cherish the fact that you've got a gift, and use that gift, But I really wanted to be an athlete, I mean, then I thought about being a sports announcer, even. This is all when I was 6 and 7 years old, 10, maybe before the age of 10, just to be part of sports. And I still like sports. I mean, I would watch ants racing on a table. You know what I mean? I would be. I mean, I haven't, but I would if it was there.
Yeah, but music and sports, it kind of goes together because you're developing a craft. You're developing. You're warming up. You're going for something.
Yeah, it's something you work at consistently, isn't it?
Hmm.
You can't just like do them a couple days a week when you're trying to get good at it. When you're trying to learn, you know, you yeah, I think that's the thing that there's a certain discipline and a deep love for it if you really want to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, discipline by itself doesn't do it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You got
You know,
to love to want to get better.
yeah, the love to want to get better, and I think that that's the fascination with athletics, and also with jazz. It's a team thing too. It's not like um, if you're a solo concert pianist, I'm sure there's your team with the orchestra. There's still, but
Yeah.
I think with being part of a group, part of a band, is almost like being part of a team. Like I mean, there were times when I'm sure you feel this too because we are in New York, where when you get a band and you're surrounded like by the level of musician that I say, man, this is what it must have felt like to be on the Yankees, at their prime, or with, uh, you know, uh,
It feels like.
when I play with somebody like, like Albert Daly, or
Sure.
or even or someone like Lee Konitz or something. I'd say this is what it must have been like to. I don't mean even somebody like Lee Konitz, but many people. I'd say, oh yeah, this is like what it must have felt like to be on the World Series championship team.
Yeah.
You know,
You got a chance to get in on with people like Albert Daly, Chet Baker, and Lee Konitz and those cats, man. I understand the feeling you're talking about. I mean,
well,
those guys I've never worked with, but I sure admire them a lot.
well, thanks. I mean, and we'll talk about later. I met you when I had just left Chet, but your resume too is, it's a fantastically full of gifted people that you've played with. I mean, you played with people like uh, um, Tom Harrell, and you have done something with trumpets.
Of course.
You've been in Wynton's band and in John Fettis's group. You're in every big band that everybody, uh, you know, whenever they need a great trumpet soloist. You've been with the Duke Ellington Memorial Band for like 40 years now, right? Something. It's funny to talk about 40 years.
Yeah, I joined the band in 1983.
And and then you've had the Don Byron experience of playing with Don, who's a gifted, brilliantly gifted musician as well. Also, you played in groups behind people like Tony Bennett
Yeah.
and Sarah Vaughan, and
Mhm.
uh, even Samara Joy. I mean, you've been around the best people of your, what I mean to say is your generation, and
Yeah.
the little elders, the elders that people of your generation would be able to play with. I think you play with Sam Rivers too.
Yes, yes, I did a couple of records with him, and I was lucky enough to play with even there's some guys on the people on my bio that I didn't mention. People like Red Callender.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
wonderful bass.
yeah, he was a beautiful bass player and tuba player. And
Wow, I didn't know he played tuba.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He played tuba, and I met him through the Cheathams when I was living in San Diego. So and Big Joe Turner, I got a chance to
Oh
work with
yeah.
Turner. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of there's a few of the older guys, Panama Francis, that I didn't mention that I probably is not on my resume that I should have mentioned. But yeah, I'm just saying there's a lot of older musicians.
Well, that's what I know that you have done that. So we've both been fortunate to be around that vibe and be around those people like that, like Big Joe Turner, incredible,
Yeah.
blues singer, and Sam Rivers, and then you were in my band with Esperanza and Victor Lewis and
Yes,
Sasha Perry,
I remember that very
which
well.
was a great rhythm section.
Wow.
And there was I've seen you with all kinds of wonderful musicians and people that aren't so know, Marty Ehrlich, and
Hmm.
you know you played behind Tony Bennett too, didn't you?
Yes, a few times. I did a recording with him with the Basie Band, a Christmas record.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's I forget what it's called, but it's Bill Holman did all the arrangements, and
Oh
yeah,
wow.
I
Did you get
mean,
to meet Bill Holman?
yes, yes, I did, and yeah, because he did all the arrangements for that. We did a DVD, and uh, and we did some live stuff, not with Bill, but with Tony Bennett and the Basie Band doing that Christmas record, which was maybe about 10 10 years ago.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. I mean, that's so you've had you're so modest. I've got to fish for these things in you. I mean, thank you for complimenting me and everything, but I feel that you've also been around enough of that. Trying. We're both students of the music. We're both the history of the music is so important to us that wherever you could grab a taste of it because you understand the intrinsic value of getting next to those people to that it shines upon you,
Yes.
and I know that that's been a real motivating force for you,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, and I mean, well, you even played with Madonna. I mean, I'm speaking of motivating forces there.
Yeah,
I
that was just a video. It was a video. I really didn't play with her. It was a camera on camera scene.
Were
I
you
think
on the camera with your horn, or you were just there because you're so good looking?
nope. I was there because they needed. You know what the story behind that was? I auditioned for the video, but she said, "Well, there's no trumpet in this video, so I like his look. I like his energy. Just put him on piano." And so
Really?
yes, I was pantomiming on piano, and the name of the video is called "My Baby's Got a Secret." Little Jimmy Scott was in it, and
Oh,
Panama Francis.
really? Little Jimmy Scott and Panama Francis. Did you get to play with Little Jimmy Scott?
You know what? He sat in with me with one of Don Byron's bands. And but I knew Jimmy Scott more so than to play with him. I knew him as a person more so than a musician, and I always felt like we were friends. Matter of fact, he came to see us. I think it was at the Regatta Bar in Boston with Don and with Don Byron. And he got a chance to hang out with us, and he just full of stories. But I felt like I had a more of a personal relationship with Jimmy, more so than a musical one.
Uh huh. Well, he was wonderful. I remember, when I first heard him sing "When Did You Leave Heaven."
Yeah.
I had a neighbor, and he called me and he said, listen to this cat. I bet you don't know who this is. And this is before he made his resurgence. So I had never heard that, and I said, man, he sure sounds. I thought you mean it's a he. First of all, that was a surprise in a way. I said I couldn't. It was kind of androgynous his voice. And then I said he really sounded like Nancy Wilson a little bit.
Oh,
And then he said, well, Nancy came up out of him
right.
because he was from Cleveland.
Mhm.
And she was growing up in Cleveland. And, you can really hear, especially because I knew her version of that song that she had, why did they let you go? How are things in heaven? Um,
Yeah,
you
I knew, I heard that Nancy checked him out. Also, Stevie Wonder checked out little Jimmy
uh-huh.
Scott.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you can hear that influence, all of those things. I only met him one time, and we had a lovely conversation. I just, had a very brief moment with him, and
Yes.
but I didn't really, and I never played with him or anything. But he seemed like a nice cat, and
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the one for some reason. I think I was the Cupid with getting him together with a harmonica player named Gregoire Marais. Gregoire, I don't know if you know Gregoire. He's from,
no,
anyway, he does a lot of stuff with many different people. Anyway, I think Jimmy Scott ended up hiring him because Gregoire used to follow me around. Anyway, Gregoire's a great harmonica player that's on the scene these days, and he plays with Jimmy Scott.
oh, yeah, and I know that Talib played with him too. TK Blue, he's
Oh yeah,
called now, but I know,
yeah. Another funny story about Jimmy Scott. Way before I met Patience Higgins, I was live. You know Patience, right?
very well,
Okay.
sure.
I was living in San
I love
Diego,
these.
and I had a cassette, and it was a Jimmy Scott cassette. I forget the name of it, but Patience was on the recording. And when I came to New York, I pulled out the cassette, played it. Anyway, years later, I found out that that was Patience on the Jimmy Scott record. So I was listening to Patience before I even met him, and it was
Before
from
you
the
met
Jimmy.
him.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that's
from
funny because
Scott record.
see, Patience is another one of those guys who like is ubiquitous. He's in a lot of places and people don't even know it's him.
Right, exactly.
He's another one of
That's
those New York
funny.
stories.
That's how I got to know him because I didn't know it was him.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that James Zollar is a little bit like that too. Oh, you're the guy on that record.
Right, I
It
get
was
a little
you.
bit of that. Yeah,
I bet you get that, right? Like, oh, you played that solo. That's you.
yeah,
And
I get that. Especially that some of that record you mentioned, the Don Byron stuff, the Bug Music record.
right, bug music.
Hmm.
Well, I knew Don Byron. Oh, when he was a student of the New England Conservatory in the early '70s, um, and actually late '60s, I believe it
Yes.
was, because we're around the same age.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I was living at New England Conservatory. I didn't go to school there, but there's a long story which I won't tell of how
Mhm.
I got to move in there. I had a friend who didn't have a roommate. He was going there, and his roommate was away all the time, so there was a free bed in the room. And they had the practice rooms in the basement of Jordan Hall, so I just moved into the dorm because I wanted to be around. Jackie Byard invited me to come to Boston to get next to him because he heard me in New York and he brought me to play a concert at Harvard University with him when I was 17, and so he brought me there, and I just ended up hanging out at New England Conservatory, and that's when Don, I think I was 18, Don was there, and so we used to jam together, and we'd play a lot with this drummer named Jerry Adams, who was around Boston and died and made all the sessions. Don was very proficient and very studious and very dedicated and a lovely cat and really good clarinet player.
Oh, great
Where
clarinet player.
where you didn't hear clarinet players in those days too, man. You don't hear them that much now, even, but a little. It was really rare to find somebody who kind of had his own way of playing. Right from he was always an original thinker. And
Yes, exactly.
how did you get involved? Daughter's in Italy now. Is that true?
Right now, I'm not really sure. I know he did an Italy stint many years ago, but I'm not sure if he's in Italy.
Where is he living? Do you know? I don't
Oh,
think.
no, he's in Woodstock. He's been in Woodstock.
Oh, so he's in Woodstock. That's where he resides.
Yes.
Yeah, so that shows you how long ago I was in contact with him. He was going over there to do some
Yeah,
residency or something in Italy for a year or
I
two.
remember that. Yeah, yeah, and he stayed there for a while.
Yeah, that's where I kind of lost track of him. So he's around, but you know, he was there was a certain point where Don was very prominent and was recording and touring, and I think you were in that
Yeah,
particular.
yeah, I was got involved in that scene with him. Um, because he's did like a lot of different projects, but how I got involved with Don, I just remember was through Mercer Ellington. Don played baritone in the Ellington band and the little
Oh,
clarinet. So that's I think that's how we first connected, and probably and after that we played with David Murray's big band for a while. But I think I remember touring with Don in Japan with Mercer Ellington. Don was on Barry.
uh-huh. And so when you joined the Ellington Memorial Orchestra, Mercer was still at the helm of it.
Oh yeah, he was going pretty strong too at that time.
What kind of guy was Mercer? This we're talking about the son of Duke Ellington.
Yes,
Those
yeah,
of you
that
who
was
don't know, who was a trumpet player and really took over the band when his father passed.
right.
And
He was a good guy. Let me see. Um, he treated me like a son. I always felt like he was, um, as far as like a band leader, I thought he was very, very uh, proficient, but a lot of people compared him too much to his dad, the Duke, and so I felt like there was always maybe he's not as good as his dad, but um, at certain points, I remember him having the band sounding really, really super tight, and
mhm.
especially when we were touring. And he wrote he had a few arrangements that he arranged for the band and he wrote for the band, and I always felt like his tunes were very exotic, you know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he was.
Credited with a couple of tunes. There's a couple of fairly well known tunes that are actually Mercer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, things that what they used to be. Um,
yeah, that he gets credit for that.
gets credit for it. I'm not sure if he actually wrote it, but he gets credit for it. I don't know the story behind that. I'm not sure. I heard he won the bet in a card game. He won the song in a card game.
He won the song of the card game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something like those guys. They were into cards a lot. You know, yeah, those cats. And
Yeah, Dizzy too.
yeah, right, right. There you go. So
They're always playing cards. Those guys.
right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Chet Baker was a good card player, man. He was like when we travel, you know, he always traveled with the band. Like he never took separate car or anything. You know, I mean, it was like if we were on trains, the U Rail Pass, so we would play a lot of cards, and we'd be playing. And when Chet got the deal, he'd call blackjack, and I don't know what he did because I couldn't catch him. If he was cheating, he surprised me. But just it would happen to be that once he got the deal and he called blackjack, then you better guard your money
Oh,
because
really?
it was soon gone. You know, we
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
gamble for real big stakes, so it
right.
was it was pretty safe. But
Yeah,
but it was like he was a slick card player that way, and he taught me to play a game called Casino, which
okay.
is a game he had learned in jail in Italy, and he was a real good casino player. And he taught me, and he was a good teacher. That was another thing about Chet, that he never taught professionally or anything. But if you were interested in learning anything, including music, he would show you what he knew about it. And so he showed me, well, I played enough casino with him to kind of learn it. And then I got to where I could often beat him. And he got mad at me. Whenever I'd win, he'd scowl at me. And like sometimes he'd just like, you, you know. And
Yeah, yeah. I remember Mercer getting upset at cats beating him at chess.
really,
They were playing cards and chess. But yeah, yeah. But I heard about these stories because I I can play chess. I can play cards, but I wasn't on that level, you know. So yeah, Mercer used to get upset about cats beating him in chess.
yeah. Well, a story I've told before, but I gotta love to tell it. It's true. Ira Sullivan, who could be very competitive. You know, Ira was very giving and generous. And oh, did you know Ira? Did you?
No, but I of course I know his music. I love his playing, but I never met him.
Well, you know, Ira was my early mentor. I met Ira when I was 13 and everything. So one time we were on the road and we were in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We stayed at a farm, a friend's farm. Steve Patton is his name. He recently passed. Wonderful guy. And he had a farm in York, Pennsylvania. So they went to sleep early. It was a Sunday night. We were just going to hang out a couple of days at the farm and, you know, cool out after a gig. And so we're there at the farm and they're all asleep. It's like 10 o'clock at night, and Ira and I are night people. We're up and we're like, well, what do you want to do? And, you know, well, we saw a Scrabble board. And I told Ira that I had been playing a bit of Scrabble lately with this girl that I was with, who wasn't with us. You know, and we've gotten into it. I said, I've been playing pretty frequently. I've gotten pretty good at Scrabble, I think. He says, really? Want to play some Scrabble? I said, I'd love to. So Ira, being, you know, competitive and being who he is, you know, I mean, I was all for that. The first word of the game, which Ira got, the word he came up with was zealots. 7 letters with a Z.
What does that word mean?
A zealot, oh, that's very interesting. That's the real meaning of it, is that a zealot is someone who's passionate about something. Like you
Okay.
have zeal, like religious zealots were people that were like the early Christians, or actually, I'm going to ask my machine, what is the real definition of zealot? This is where computers are good.
To do that, you'll need to
Now,
turn off airplane mode.
turn off airplane mode to get it. You see, so I will do that. But it means someone who is extremely enthusiastic
Okay.
about the point, maybe to the point of fanaticism.
Yeah.
And as Ira and I were both that way about music, I would say most of the musicians I know, like yourself, we are zealots. So there was no better word to describe us aside from our religious feelings, which we may be that way too, as far as it concerns the Almighty. But as far
Now,
as music is concerned, we are. What is a zealot?
In modern English, zealot is used to describe a person who is fanatical and uncompromising in pursuit of their religious, political, or other ideals.
A person
This
who is
answer is from
fanatical
encyclopedia.com.
and uncompromising in pursuit of their religious, political, or other ideals.
okay. It's a passionate zealot.
Yeah.
Z-E-L-Z-O
Z-E-A-L-O-T
Z-E-A
is the
L-O-T.
singular, and plural is with an S.
Oh,
Z-E-A-L-O-T-S. And it's like 150 points, by the way, in
wow.
Scrabble. So if your opponent gets that on the first move of the game, because it's like triple or something, isn't it? The first word is double anyway, and it's got a Z, and it's got all 7 letters, and that's double. It was like, you know, and the worst part of the story, which I'll go on after that, is he made me continue the game. I just
Wow.
wanted to quit right there. I said, what's the point? I mean, you just got like so many points. How in the world can I catch up? He says, well, you know, it's just the beginning. Game's just starting. I was like, oh, great. You know,
Wow. Yeah, those games.
so, but
Now I know what zealots is.
now we
Thanks.
know. And you see, we are zealots to some extent. I think all of us and our friends, we understand zealots. I don't even know if there's an actual uh, noun for the state of being a zealot.
Yes.
Zealotude? No.
Yeah.
Zealotudiny? Well, if anybody out there has the noun for the state of being a zealot,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so
Wow.
you are in the, and you also got to, I mean, the singers, speaking of which, on your resume here, You sang behind Lady Gaga and Sarah Vaughan.
Yeah, well, that Lady Gaga, that was a Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga collaboration.
Right,
We
that
we did live. That's another Tony Bennett situation that I was in, and totally different than the other one, than the Basie thing. This was totally different with different big band and everything. This is when Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett were doing their duos. Uh,
right. I remember that was like one of the later things that he actually performed.
and we did with Andy Farber's big band, which was the band that was on Broadway. It was called After Midnight. It was a band that Wynton Marsalis put together and Andy Farber put together. And what the deal was, Tony Bennett came to the theater. It's called now called the Lena Horne Theater. We had a we did 9 months on Broadway, and Tony Bennett, look, it was a live band on the stage, and big band,
A live what on the stage?
live big band
Oh, live
on the
big band on stage.
Broadway stage. And Tony Bennett came to one of the gigs, to one of the performances, and he says, "I like that band." So um, we were hired to do the live at Lincoln Center with Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga with Andy Farber's big band. I forget what the project, what the whole evening was called, but it's a DVD, and it's Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga live at Lincoln Center.
Can you give us a little background on Andy Farber too? Because I think you could say it better than I could. But there's another New York
Yeah,
person who kind of is not in the mainstream of
yeah.
people's thoughts about things, but has made a lot of valuable contributions.
Well,
Uh, Give us a little nutshell.
okay. Um, Well, first of all, he's a great writer, orchestrator, conductor, player, serious play, tenor, alto, soprano, flute.
Yeah, he can play.
Yeah, and I've been knowing him so far. I mean, it's so long ago that I forgot how we met, but I think we did some stuff together. I think one of the we did some stuff together with Lincoln Center. I remember one of the first things I did with him was swinging with Basie or something, and Andy was on tenor. Frank Foster was conducting, but me and Andy go so far back that you see, I played in this big band. I just did something today with him. I mean, 2 days ago with him. It was for a Dell commercial. Um, he's into the BMI workshop things. But he's a great orchestrator. He writes really good for the instrument.
Oh, first of all, the BMI workshop, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of school in a way. It's people, accomplished arrangers sign up even to be part of that, right? It's a workshop, and
Yes.
and you play. There's a band, and you get your work played. And would
Yeah.
you explain a little bit about that to people
I don't
too?
know too much about it, but I know they rehearse. I think they rehearse. It's a BMI workshop. You sign up for it, and you get critiqued on your arrangements or writing, and you give a concert at the end of the semester.
And some
And
of the judges are people like Michael Benny and Manny Album. I know that they've done.
yeah, many album, Mike Benny, Don Braden, Dave Berger. Uh, um, Yeah, so I'm not involved in it. I just go to a lot of the concerts, and they usually put together a really good band because some of these compositions they're pretty involved, and every time I go, I mean, the band knocks me out. But you get your compositions played, and I think Andy is one of the main guys for that right now, for the BMI workshop.
Uh, so so you did that thing with Tony and Lady Gaga. He sensed when he heard the band, and he could tell that this was
Yeah.
first
And
class
also,
unit.
Andy goes back to John Hendricks. I mean, but there's a lot of stuff that Andy's done. John Hendricks in the Long Island scene, and him and Kenny Rampton played in John Hendrix's like octet or something like that. So, yeah. Anyway, Andy put together the band for the lady. It was already a put together band, and we did Broadway. It was 10 years ago, and it was called, the Broadway show was called After Midnight. And so anyway, Tony Bennett came by and heard the band and loved it. And like I said, a lot of it is Andy's and Wynton Marsalis's band that they put together, and the band is still together. Actually, we just recorded under the Andy Farber Orchestra,
Oh,
and a few years ago. But he's
and
great. I have no problem playing his compositions, as far as like playing the instrument and the way that it's laid out for the trumpet.
well, you have no problem playing anything. That's the
Well,
thing. I mean, that I think that's why I compared you to Benny Carter with, with Ella's comment that you are about as complete a trumpet player. I mean, James can play some killer, beautiful jazz solos. Also, if called upon, I believe you could sight read the circus.
well, yeah, depending on what range it is. But yeah, I mean, I'm just, yeah, I really got into reading and learning the fundamentals of being a musician, as far as like uh, sight reading and stuff like that. I have lately I've been having difficulties with my with my chops, because
Oh,
over the years I just turned 65. So, but I'm working through it. It's not, I mean, I'm just slowing down a little bit. Yeah, but yeah, I love planning ensembles, and my motto is listen to whatever the lead trumpet player does, follow him. Even if it's not right, follow him.
well,
Because
that's how Ira Sullivan taught me to read for not reading. He
uh,
said the problem. He says the thing is, he says you don't have trouble with the notes. You can read the notes all right. I said, yeah. He said, it's the rhythms. I said, yeah. He said, so all you do, he said, they're not going to make you play lead, play third. And then whatever you hear, whatever rhythm you hear the lead alto player playing or the rest of the section, just play that.
that's exactly what I do. So I'm really keen on focusing in on the lead player. Like I played in the Basie band for a few years, and after a while I got really used to how Mike Williams was
Hmm.
phrasing stuff. So it took a minute, but yeah, I like to cue into to lead players. Like match their vibrato and cutoffs, stuff like that.
That's a wonderful lesson.
Yeah.
When you were on the Basie band with Frank Foster, did you play? Did you get to play often under Frank Foster?
Oh, no, actually, I never, I knew Frank. This is a funny story. Me and Frank were very close, but my first, when I first started playing with the Basie band was with Grover Mitchell,
I remember that band, yeah.
but I was playing with the Frank Foster Big Band.
The
I,
Loud
I
Minority.
Yeah, but I never played with Frank when he was conducting the Basie Big Band. I was with them, and I was with Mercer Ellington, and we played concerts besides each other. But I would remember if I played with Frank Foster in the Basie band. So, but I saw the band many times, and me and Frank were very, very close. I really miss him. Him and Cecilia. I love them both.
I didn't know his wife, but he was a beautiful person. I loved him.
Yeah.
And I cooked him dinner one night, man. He came to Montreal when I was teaching up there, and I was like the only person he kind of knew. Of course, he met Charles Ellison, who was a wonderful person, and helped to bring him up there. But one night, I said to Frank, if you want to come to dinner while you're up here, I'd love to make you dinner. My daughter Emily was like just a couple months old, and I said I make fantastic ribs and stuff. He says, "Well, no, I don't eat pork, but you can make me something else." I said, "Well, you name it. What would you like?" And he said he wanted some really well-made liver, and I happen to be good. I like liver. I'm one of those people, you bread it in the flour, and you throw. I put onions. And usually I put onions and bacon, but since he didn't eat pork, I had to eschew the bacon. But and made mashed potatoes, and my dinner was a rousing success. And
Really, yeah, my mother made liver and onions all the time.
yeah, I mean, I like liver, and most people go, "Oh, liver," I'm all for it.
And
But
I'm not into it, but my mother was really good at it.
they say it's very good for you too.
That's what yeah, yeah.
It provides iron, and but um,
I could never get past the taste.
but Frank was a beautiful person, wasn't he? He was really
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, I never worked with Frank in the Basie band, but we've been opposite each other with Mercer on certain concerts. Dennis McCrail was on drums.
oh,
And,
Dennis can play, man. Dennis is
yeah,
Hank Jones loved Dennis, man.
yeah, Dennis
Yeah,
was
he was one of his very favorites. We were talking about drummers,
yeah,
and Dennis is another guy that cats people sleep on.
yeah,
You know, we know how good he is,
yes.
but not everybody knows. You know, you say Dennis McCrell, and many people just aren't aware of him.
Yeah. Great writer, arranger, conductor. He ran the Basie band for a minute. And we actually, me and Dennis grew up together. And he spent some time in San Diego.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
And you were there with me when you met me. He was in San Diego at that time, going to high school.
well, you were going to high school when James and I met. Just to get the story straight, was in October of 1975.
Yeah.
I remember that because I left Chet Baker in San Diego uh, that time and kind of was stranded in San Diego because we had driven from New York to San Diego. Um, and the band went on to LA, and Chet and I had a falling out. I later joined him when I got back to New York, but we would do that from time to time. And but so I was so a good friend of ours. Well, the kid who was the doorman or the ticket taker at the club, the Catamaran, was a friend of ours named Richard Lotz.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and Richard, somehow I had left Chet, and I was there, and I had no money because I'd spent most of my salary talking to a girlfriend I had in Europe who was undergoing an emotional crisis, and I didn't realize the price of talking to Europe on a hotel phone. And let's say the least, I didn't have enough money to buy a ticket back to New York. So Richard said, you might as well stay with my brother and my mother and me. So I moved, I stayed in with them. And then he
Yeah.
got me a gig at your high school, which paid like, a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And
Mission Bay High School. Mission Bay High School under the direction of Ray Vanoli.
yeah,
Mhm.
and yeah, there was a couple of guys there. There was a trombone player named Bob Holst.
Yeah, Bob Holtz. He's more of I remember him writing and arranging.
Right. Well, Richard introduced me to him. I met him, and Joe Murillo,
Joe Murillo, yes. Tenor.
who was the mentor to a lot of people. But I heard you, and what I mean to say is, I heard James when he was in high school, and you were playing well. I remembered I was very impressed by you, even at that age, because your high school stage band. I did a clinic with them. That was the thing, and I wasn't that much older than them. I mean, I was like 23, and you were like 17 or something,
Yes. Hmm.
and probably 16. But I remembered hearing you then and saying to myself, this guy is going to be a musician. I could hear that. And
Yeah, that was a beautiful time, by the way, because that school was right near a beach, actually, and the bay. It was just, it was a magical time. I really treasure that. I remember that period very well. It was the mid 70s, 75, like you said, 75.
yeah, and San Diego is such a beautiful place physically, such a, those cliffs, just, and
Sunset Cliffs.
is that what it's called? That has a name, huh?
Mhm.
That was the first time I saw people hang gliding.
Oh,
I
yeah.
couldn't believe it. I went somewhere, and this guy John Hennahan, I met him. He was someone I had known. He'd come down to the club when I was playing with Chet. We'd become friends, and he'd give me his number and stuff. So we hung out a little. and he took me and we watched people. I was like, man, those people are jumping off the cliff. It's
Yep.
like, and then what are they doing? You know, it looked like one of those movies of the Japanese at the end of the war. I was like, you
Yeah.
know,
And
and then they flew. I said,
yeah,
wow. And I knew that was something I would never try. But
yeah. No, to this day, I haven't tried it, but I love watching those guys.
it was amazing to watch, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And now your wife is a wonderful, well, wonderful human being and a very fine musician herself. Her name is Nabucco.
Mhm.
I say that right, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, Nabucco.
Or
And
you
she,
can see Nabucco, Nabucco,
yeah, sometimes
Nabucco.
people call her Nabucco. I used to kiddingly call her Nabokov. So I would call her Vladimir. No, the
Right.
writer. Yeah,
Yeah.
Vladimir Horowitz, the piano player, but Nabokov, he wrote Lolita and a bunch of other things.
Okay.
He's most famous, I mean, in the popular world for Lolita.
Mhm.
But she, yeah, so you have been together for many,
19 years.
19 years.
Mhm. Yeah. In
And
fact, you remember when we got married in 2005?
yeah, I remember that. And I thought you'd been together even before then, but
A year before that. We met in 2004.
right. And did you meet in Japan or did you met?
Oh, no. We met at the Jazz Standard because the Clayton Hamilton band was playing at the Jazz Standard, and she happened to be there, and I was there. She knew Randy Napoleon, uh, a guitarist. You know Randy,
No.
a great guitar player.
Oh,
Anyway, he was a friend of hers, and then I'm from the West Coast. I'm not from the West Coast, but I lived out there for a long time. John Clayton's on my very first record, so I knew a lot of the guys in the band. And then Snooky Young was playing with him. So
oh,
anyway, yeah, it was a great big band, John Clayton Hamilton big band. So I knew a lot of the guys from the West Coast, Gilbert Castellanos, I mean, a bunch of guys, Maurice Spears, Jeff Clayton. Anyway, they came to the Jazz Standard because I wanted to see the band. So that's where we met. We met the Jazz Standard at the Clayton Hamilton big band concert. I remember John Faddis was there because we all love Snooky Young. Snooky was playing in the band. So that's
yeah.
where we met the Jazz Standard in 2004.
I used to see Snooky. He would sometimes play on the Merv Griffin show in the orchestra, and I'd see him at Jim and Andy's
Oh,
hanging
yeah.
out over there. In my teens, I would go down there with Bill Berry and Richie Kamuka.
Yeah.
They'd bring me down to Jim and Andy's, and Snooky was a real. Uh, I even heard him. One time I would have my lessons with Richie Kamuka in the
Hmm.
back room of the Merv Griffin show. And so while we were having a lesson, not all my lessons, but some of my lessons took place there. I would go and Richie would meet me, and we'd spend an hour just going through some stuff about the horn. And mostly he taught me playing melodies. We worked on that a lot, so it was always musical. And guys in the band like would just stop and look at you. I think they were practicing, and I'd see like now and then like Jim Hall or Bill Watrous or Brookmeyer or somebody would just stand there for a minute and watch my lesson and then go on and do something else because everybody was
Yeah.
warming up while we gave our lesson. There was a lot of sound around us. He'd take me to a corner of the room, but uh, Jim Hall told me one day that you can tell a lot about a person and about somebody's playing by how they warm up and what they do. And he took me around and we listened to everybody warm up. And Jim observed things about them. He'd say, now there's Bill Watrous. He's a real consummate technician. And you see what he's doing? He's doing long tones and lip slurs. He gets ready with that. Richie is playing some Lester Young style stuff. He's just playing a melody because that's what Richie does and that's how he feels comfortable warming up. Now Snooky is doing this, and so we watched Snooky warm up for a minute too. with Jim Hall's narration.
Yeah.
I forget exactly what he was doing because he went through so many cats in the band. We didn't go through everybody, but Jim wanted to drive the point home that you would hear that. So I mean, I did hear Snooky Young warm up, which was something, and the section was so amazing. He just was one of those cats that just lifted the trumpet section. His very presence in it would.
Yeah, he's the first guy because I lived in LA for a second. So I saw him playing with Gerald Wilson. So he's the first guy I saw play with a plunger before I joined
Uh-huh.
the band. Yeah, because Snooky was great. He played the cup. He played a cup mute, but it had a plunger sound. Anyway, the plunger vibe. Snooky was the first guy that I saw do that live
Oh wow.
back in
Yeah, I mean that was.
early '80s when I was there.
So you heard the Gerald Wilson band, and you heard.
Many times with Oscar Brashear, Rick Baptist, Joe Adino, uh, Ernie Watts, um, uh, Marie Spears again. But yeah, I saw at the Hollywood Bowl they have these great concerts, and seeing, I remember seeing Marshall Royal there too. But yeah, I used to go to the Hollywood Bowl and see the big bands play,
Wow.
and
Yeah, I mean I have a one thing I have is Oliver Nelson's band at the Hollywood Bowl with Frank Strozier,
yeah,
which is one of they do this I Remember Bird, where Strozier just is off the
it's
Richter scale.
the same record that has Down by the Riverside, a live version of Down by the Riverside.
Is this Oliver Nelson?
Yeah. Anyway, you said Frank Strozier with Oliver Nelson. I listened. I checked out a lot of that stuff. I love it.
Yeah, I mean Strozier to me is one of the most underrated cats. Another person that
Is he
really
still
should have.
with us? Is he still on Earth?
He's on the planet.
Mhm.
I have heard that I mean he hasn't played in a long time. At least the saxophone. He felt he couldn't find a good reed. That's what
Okay.
uh, that's what I heard. And I never really met him. I mean, I saw him a couple times with George Coleman, but I never really got to know Strozier. Um, but he sure can play. I mean, he's got some of my favorite things. Well, you and I, we both share an interest in iconoclastic kind of players. You would know people like the Bill Hardmans and the Joe
Yeah.
Gordon. Sam Noto, who we've done on the show. We had a
Yeah.
beautiful interview with Sam.
Yeah.
Nick Travis. You mentioned we were talking about influences. Nick Travis and my father got fired from Horace Heights band together.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they were late. They went
That
out
was
hanging out.
Is that in Boston?
No, they were touring. My dad came from Boston, but they were touring the country. My dad's first band he was with when he got out of high school was Horace Heights,
Oh,
and
okay,
then he
got
went with Jerry Wald,
okay.
and he ended up with Dorsey,
Mhm.
and he had his own band around Boston too. But he said, "Oh, Nick Travis," because I had a record with Zoot and stuff, and Nick Travis was on it. He said, "Oh, I knew Nick Travis." He said, "Nick was a great guy." He said, "First time I smoked pot was with Nick Travis."
Wow. Love, man, this play. I love Nick Travis, man.
Yeah, there were some guy. I mean, the guy on the West Coast that he didn't mention, but a guy I love um, is Bobby Shue.
Oh yeah, yeah. I met him. I never studied with him, but I met Bobby at LaRue Brown's Watson's place. LaRue Brown is Clifford Brown's widow, and she was a big
Oh,
force in the LA scene, and they were very close. Bobby Shue and LaRue Brown.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I met Bobby Shue in Cork, Ireland, when he was there with Teddy Edwards, which is the only time I met Teddy Edwards doing a tribute to Clifford Brown. And it was Bobby Shue and Teddy Edwards and Red Mitchell, and I can't remember the rest of the band. But I was there playing with an all-star group of what would you say, people from England, Scotland, and Ireland, the British Isles,
Mhm.
and I was their guest, and
Yeah.
it was this festival. But I ended up eating most of my meals with Bobby, Teddy, and Red, and it was just such a wonderful time. Bobby was a great cat. You know, we had a wonderful, and of course they were doing a tribute to Clifford and Max.
Right.
So since Teddy had been on one of the original Clifford and Max records, Bobby was in the Clifford Brown role, and they were playing all Dahoud and Joy Spring and LaRue and all those Clifford Brown tunes.
Yeah.
I imagine that they were close. Is LaRue still with us?
No, no, LaRue passed about 20 years ago, I would think. Yes. I knew her pretty well. I think it's been a little while, but her let me see, her grandson, I mean Clifford Brown Jr. is around. Then there's another Clifford Brown. Clifford Brown Jr. is a DJ. And I think he's still in San Francisco. He has a son. I think it's Clifford Brown the third.
No, he's a
And
DJ in the old sense that we understand DJs as playing real records and that kind of thing, not just
I I
playing.
I, I think he's still a DJ in the San Francisco area, in the Bay Area.
Uh-huh.
I think it's K Soul. I'm not sure. It's been a long time, but he has a son also, which is Clifford Brown the third, and I'm not sure if he plays. But yeah. Anyway, I know that family. I knew LaRue more better than I knew. Um, Also, Clifford Brown has a nephew plays drums named Rayford Griffin. He plays more on the fusion side. That's Clifford's sister's son. He's a great drummer, Rayford Griffin, who I used to play with also, and I met him through LaRue Brown also.
Did she talk about Clifford much?
Yeah, yeah, she talked about him a lot. In
What
fact,
would
she
she
said,
what would she say about him? I mean,
"Oh, you just okay." I mean, she told me how they met, and they met through Max Roach, and I guess LaRue was doing a dissertation about jazz music and how jazz was not a legitimate art form.
right.
And so anyway, Max said, "Man, Clifford, you need to spend some time with this lady to uh, introduce her to jazz and give
Edifier.
yeah, just just make sure she knows jazz has the validity that it has." So anyway, that's to make a long story short. That's how they met through Max Roach, and she said that Clifford was like everybody said, was just beautiful guy. Um, uh, he was a great pianist. She showed me pictures of the wedding, but he played a lot of instruments, and he was a master mathematician. He was a great chess player. He was
I've
really
heard
good
that.
with numbers. Yeah, really good with numbers, and a great father. Um, and just like everybody, I hear a lot of interviews and people mention how great of a nice of a person he was. And yeah, yeah, she mentioned him a lot, and that's how they met through Max Roach, and
Nice,
he's an angel from what
beautiful
I understand.
story.
And consummate practicer. He loved to practice. He loved Rafael Mendez a lot. This is all the information I got from LaRue.
Well, there's
He,
that famous tape that I thought was quite amusing, where Clifford's practicing. He's playing Cherokee,
yeah.
and LaRue comes in and says, "Clifford, do you want such and such for dinner?" And I remember we got to pick up the laundry. Or see, I don't remember exactly what small talk it was. And he pauses and he talks to her. He says, "Oh yes, okay, sure." And then he continues practicing in the exact same spot of the Bridge of Cherokee that he was on.
Yes, I have that. I have that. Yeah, yeah.